Cool, so recording started. This is the NWC show. This is actually episode 10, which was my goal by June, so we're here already, which is pretty cool. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Anthony from Rated R for Rasslin on YouTube. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it was cool. I've been watching quite a lot of your live streams recently. And the one with Joycey the other day, I was like, you know what, I need to reach out to this guy and get him on. It was just such a cool, like, chill kind of vibe. I was like, I need to chat to this man.
Yeah, I'm trying to do collabs with like everybody I can find, who's ever interested wants to do it. I'm down for all of it, man, just to get to know other people, get other people's opinions on wrestling, the current product, or just like you can talk about like, older stuff. I just love talking wrestling. That's all it is. Yeah,
the exact same, man. That's like my favorite thing to do. Somebody sits me down to chat about wrestling. It's a good conversation because I love doing it. So the way we always open these podcasts is with one question. What got you into wrestling? What was that moment that you saw it and you were like, this is my thing. I need to watch this.
To be honest with you, it had to have been Hulk Hogan. Now, so I'm 31, right? So I was born in 89. I didn't see that beginning part of Hogan until later on. But with, the tapes, renting videos, I was able to go back and see. And generally speaking, yeah, my cousin was big into that late 80s wrestling. He was a big fan of the Ultimate Warrior and all that stuff like that. So I got to see some of it, but after the fact, I ended up watching it. And then just that Hogan, WrestleMania 4-5 Hogan, that era, that's what really got me in it. But at the time, what I saw live was probably just Bret Hart. That's the thing I saw like live, and that really got me into it more during the live time. But for me going back, it was watching Hogan, WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 4, WrestleMania 5 Hogan.
Definitely, man. I was born 91, so I'm 30 this year, which I'm stressing about as it is. But, it was kind of attitude era time for me, so a little bit later. But I remember first thing of watching wrestling was I was in my mum's friend's house. It was on the TV, and I just sat and watched the whole show. I never knew what it was, but I knew I was interested in seeing it. So anytime I would get wee clips of it here and there on TV, so I would watch it. But it was like that 98, 99 period when I just fell in love with it, and I've kind of watched it ever since, which was probably the NWO kind of Sting. Sting was the guy when I seen him, and I was like, I need to watch this. This is great.
Yeah.
Then obviously at that time you had Austin, Taker. Everybody pretty much that everybody remembers was just wrestling at that time. So it was a brilliant time again.
Yeah, because for me, like I said, I would go back and watch all the stuff, but during live times, it was basically just like that new generation time period that I started watching, a little bit here and there. It wasn't like I was watching Raw every Monday. I was still very young, but it was just like I would tune in and I would see some clips here and there and watch some of the stuff. But Bret Hart was always the guy who stood out a lot to me. And obviously The Undertaker, I knew him. Yoko, another guy I was just, enamored by seeing live. But yeah, I was mostly me and my brother. It was the guy I do the reviews with, my co-host on the reviews, my brother. We go back and we used to watch all these tapes that we used to go and rent. So Blockbuster Video was a big thing back then, but they never had the wrestling VHSs, so we would have to go to local spots like a Palmer Video or West Coast Video is what we had here in the States. So we would go over there and we pick up whatever we could, and most of it was WCW. Most of it was like 94, 95 WCW stuff. A lot of those war games, Hogan with the team of Hogan, Luger, Sting, and Macho Man, all dressed in army, taking on the Legion of Doom inside the war games cage. So all that stuff like that. We used to watch all that stuff back, and then going back and watching all the WrestleManias, the tapes, WrestleMania 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just going the way through. So that's basically what it was for us when we were kids, is just going back and watching all that stuff. And then obviously for me, honestly, like in 96, 97, I watched more WCW Nitro than I did Raw at the time. 98, 99 was when I started making the switch to watch more WWF, especially after the whole Tyson stuff.
Here so I live in Scotland here, if you can't tell with my accent.
Yeah.
Like VHS tapes and stuff like that just were not able to get found. So I think it was like 2002 plus was when you started getting DVDs kind of regularly. Yeah. But before that, it was like a show would happen and it would be like the next year you would get the VHS, and it would be insanely priced. It'd be like £50, which is like what, like $45 or something. Like
it's ridiculous for a VHS.
You just like forget it. But then it was for me. It was WCW that really got me into wrestling because it was on free TV here in the UK. WWF was always on Sky, which you have to pay for, and my family didn't pay for it. When they went to free TV, then it was like cool. We can I was enjoying both of them, but I was always a WCW fan, like the NWO stuff, Sting, Luger, all that kind of stuff. And even now, like I'll go back onto WWE Network and watch like the old WCW stuff, the old ECW, a lot more than I watch old WWF. And it's still cool to go back and look at how cool WCW looked. Obviously, towards the end, it was like terrible writing, but everybody still looked quite cool towards the end as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like for me, it was my cousin at the time, like during that late 90s, he had one of those boxes that would get the pay-per-views for free. So we would go over to his house and we'd watch it. And we'd watch, WrestleMania 15, WrestleMania 2000, all the ECW pay-per-views. But I remember watching the ECW pay-per-views and WCW ones, especially towards like 99, 2000, where they were just dreadful and horrible pay-per-views. It was rough getting through them, but it was good times just watching all that stuff, watching all that ridiculous stuff WCW was doing at the time at 2000, 2001. But though, I remember those times. ECW, I always, I obviously remember a lot. Watching those like late night when it would come on like at 11 o'clock at night, 12, like midnight on in the States, like live, the television product. Tough to find the channel in those times. I mean, during like 99, 2000, it was tough to find the channel. But I just remember all that stuff. But it doesn't really hold up that well when I watch ECW now on the network.
No, man, when you watch it now, you're just like,
well,
this is a wee bit risky and stuff like that. You see like the chair shots, the tack, stuff like that. You're like, whoa, it's a bit much, but it had its time and place. Like it wouldn't work now. So the thing we always ask as well is two questions: is what do you love about today's product? So what's the one thing that if you had to introduce somebody to wrestling, be like, this is the best part of today's product? Is it how much of it is? How many wrestling shows there are? Is it? It's the community is quite positive sometimes. What's your favourite part about wrestling just now?
Just the wrestling right now is like what I would bring to somebody's attention would just be the athleticism in the ring. That's not my favorite part, though. I'm not a huge fan of the big spots over and over and over again. So they just kind of beat you over the head with it, like big spot after big spot after big spot. Just for me, it's like the best part about it, how much of it there is now. I think that's the best part about it. Like, it's just more of it out there. We got AEW. You have Impact that's starting to get a little bit better. New Japan, if you're not familiar, and nobody's familiar with New Japan, how the past few years have been so good in New Japan. Even if you don't have the streaming service, New Japan World, some of the stuff you're able to see on YouTube and stuff like that, it's just so good. So much of it is there. So much of it is accessible now. And even the local shows are a lot better. They get a lot of guys that you've seen in WWE previously that are in local shows. I mean, just over last WrestleMania weekend, let's pass. So a little bit before last WrestleMania, there was a show local in my town, and I got to see, John Morrison when he was in Impact. I got to see Sabu, RVD, the Lucha Bros, guys like that. That stuff is cool. Get the accessibility of it now is I think the best part about the current product. I have a lot of issues with the product itself, but the accessibility of it and being able to go anywhere and kind of see it and find it from different promotions, I think is the best part about it.
Definitely, man. I think everywhere's like got just good wrestling. So here in Glasgow, where I live, we've got ICW, which is like they're on the network just now. I don't know if it's on the US. It must be.
I think it is. It is on there. Yeah, it is.
You should check out some of their shows. They're pretty cool. It's a lot of Scottish comedy in it as well, so you might not get it, but it's just insane how much good wrestling there is. Like to watch actual in-ring like competitors, because I do a watch along on the channel, and I was doing Monday Night Raw. I think it was like 1993. I can't remember. It was like May the 15th or something like that, and it was like Crush versus Bobby Who. It was like just terrible jobbers that you never see again. You're like, who is this? Like they come in once every 6 years or something like that. Like, whoa, this is bad.
Those early years of Raw are rough. They're rough to get through. If you go back to the network and watch a few of them, they're rough to get through. Yeah, those early years.
Yeah, man. So I decided to start from like Nitro at the start to do a watch along, and then I do the same with Raw. But I just went, instead of from doing 95 with Raw like the smart person would.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll just go from 93.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I knew I'm kind of committed to it. I'm like so far in. I'm like, I don't want to give up. But then it's getting to the point when I'm like, this is just so bad to watch.
Yeah.
Like, really, really bad.
Yeah.
And the other question is, what do you dislike about today's product? Like,
The thing I dislike the most, I think, is just from a WWE standpoint. I think I'll break it up that way. From WWE standpoint, I think it's oversaturated as hell. It's just so much of it is out there from the network and all that. And it's just like, for me, the biggest issue is I made a video on my channel about the brand split and how it never will work, and it never has and never will. It was a little bit successful in the beginning, but it just doesn't have enough traction to keep it going. And I think the fact of the separation of the brands, so many different titles from each brand. You got your separate tag titles, you got your separate women's, and you have your separate mid card and upper card main event titles. I think that's my biggest problem. It's just the oversaturation of the roster being split up so much and being spread so thin, and the amount of shows that they do end up having. I think they could cut down on pay-per-views. I think they do too many of them a year. I would say maybe like 7 or 8 is probably the sweet spot. And it's so much 50-50. Like, you see a feud happen, they trade wins back and forth, or they'll put them in tag teams, revolving door tag teams back and forth. And that's my biggest issue with WWE in terms of that. And also obviously the over scripting and stuff like that. But from like an AEW and everybody else's standpoint, I feel like AEW they have a lot of guys who just don't fit on live television. Like, they don't come across as well on live television. And a lot of them focus too much on the big spots in the ring and not enough of like building the match and keeping you invested so that you're not just like looking for the next big spot. And that drives me kind of crazy. I made another video about that too, like the differences, like stuff that WWE and AEW can learn from each other in turn. Like a lot of production stuff AEW can learn from WWE, and a lot of the free-flowing nature of the show that WWE can learn from AEW. And even though I think AEW as a product is better and more entertaining than WWE's product, I just think that AEW has a lot of guys who just don't fit the bill, lack of better term, to be on television, or just don't have the chops or the reps in to be on live television, wrestle a certain way that comes off better on live television, cut those promos. Like, I take a guy for Orange Cassidy. He's a guy who has an interesting character. I think his biggest issue is that the character during the whole Chris Jericho storyline was just overseen too much week in and week out on television. And it's just the character. I think it works better if you see less of him. So like, those are my issues with like the current product. It's just certain stuff like that. Like AEW can be a little bit too indie. WWE is just a little too oversaturated, too corporate, too scripted, and you got 30 guys writing a show every week. It's too much.
100%, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's literally what I would say. I remember watching those videos and just been sitting like, like totally agree.
Yeah.
But with WWE, it's just one of those things. There's so much of it. Like, there's so many good wrestlers on their show. They hire far too many people. Like, there's no chance everybody can get over. Then, like you were saying, the early brand split. If you remember, like the 2003-04, when the pay-per-views were even split, it was like the 4 big ones when both came together, SmackDown and Raw, and then it was like, I think it was evenly split between Raw and SmackDown. But that was cool. Like, that worked because they had people like Eddie Guerrero, Taker, Kane, Triple H, like big names. Like, really, if you think about WWE just now, big name that pops to your head that is like a global name would be like Roman Reigns, maybe Seth Rollins. Like, there's no really anybody you'd be like, oh, he could be a world champion or he's cool to watch. It's when somebody gets into wrestling, like the problem I have with AEW is when Kenta debuted, so I was watching it with my fiance and she was like, who's this? Like, she's no like a big wrestling fan. I've watched Kenta for years, like way early Japanese days I've watched them, but like she's just like, who's this? Then like the next day he's in like the main event the next week and she's like, I don't really care who this is. Like, why is he here? And like you're saying, like the indie stuff, the way AEW books their shows, it is more entertaining, but it just feels like there's like that production, like the mass production is just missed like completely. And I always feel with AEW, it's just everything's tag team first. Like,
they focus big time on tag team.
Like main event, let's have a 6-man tag team. I feel like I've watched like 6-man tag teams main event since it started. Really, I'm like, what the hell's going on? Why are there so many of these? It's like like every WWE show starts off the same, right? With a promo, 12-15 minute promo to start off the show, then they get into it. AEW pretty much starts off the show almost every the same way too, just the tag team match start off the show. They bookend the show with a tag team match, like starting and finishing it. I mean, it's tough to remember the last time they had a main event other than when Kenny won the title. Was like, I think that might have been the last singles main event that I can remember off the top of my head. It's a lot of 6-mans, a lot of
stuff like that. But I mean, credit to them for focusing on the tag team division itself. But yeah, they tend to overdo it a little bit. I think they just because they focus so much on those huge spots that all these guys do, and I think that's like it's an issue. It works a little bit, but then I think they do it a little bit too much.
I think as well, they're really still a young company. They're still trying to find their feet, which is like insane to think how much wrestling fans took to the company when it's still so young. But like if you remember back in the day, you probably will. Like the first kind of part of the show would be like the kind of jobber, mid-lower card guys.
Yeah,
that set the story, get you to buy in. Then you would get like a really good tag team match, Hardy's against Edge and Christian or something like that. You'd be like, oh, I'm getting this, I like it. And then the main event would always be like the big guys, like the Takers, Triple H, Austin, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff had the reason it worked is because it's like a sales pitch or a script, like it's there, they know how it works. And just when I watch AEW sometimes, I'm like, why is there so many tag teams? It's like a battle royal, and then I don't know if you've seen it this week with the death match, and I was like, what the hell's this? Like, why are you doing this?
The death match is interesting. So they had their match, Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega, a while back. It was the unsanctioned match where they had that bed of barbed wire that they pulled out. It was kind of comical. If the death matches like they're from FMW, they're not good. I mean, to be honest with you, they're not good matches, and I don't think it's gonna help the feud. I think it may end up being kind of comical in nature when you see it on TV.
Yeah, when I seen them put out that, like, you remember ECW's barbed wire stuff looked like dangerous.
It's just ridiculous. Yeah, it was. I mean, if you go back, because it's not on the network, that Sabu Terry Funk match, that barbed wire match. It's not on the network, so you have to go find it somewhere else. But if you watch it, it's not a good match. And at the end, they just get entangled so much in that barbed wire that they have to come and just cut them out and just call a pin real quick. So it's matches that don't need to happen. And I think if they do it maybe cinematically, it'll come off better, because we've seen like the ridiculous cinematic matches, especially WWE lately. But a death match like that, as just a regular straight-laced match you're watching, I don't think it's going to go over well.
No, 100%, man. Like, death matches had their time and place. Like, I used to love that stuff when I was younger because it was different. I was so used to the WWE, WCW product. Then when I started getting a teenager and I was watching ECW, I saw death matches. I was like, oh, this is really cool. But like now I'm just like, they're not really doing anything. It's like a couple of chair shots.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen the TNA one with Abyss versus Sabu, it was terrible. Like, Sabu's just, like, his trousers are ripped. He's in the barbed wire. They're trying to, like, peel him out midway through. They just end up cutting the ropes. And I'm like, hopefully, like you said, it's going to be a cinematic match. I hope it is. But I think it's going to be like one of those early FMW ones, like now with the boxes, when like they would hit the rope and it would blow up and stuff like that.
If it's like that, I think it's going to come off really, really bad. Because like, remember, we're suspending our disbelief just a little bit to watch what we're seeing, right? And we get invested in some of it. Like, we get really into it, especially if they're live. We know it's predetermined. We know what the shtick is, but like we suspend it for a little bit. But stuff like that, that's like, I mean, come on, dude. Like, that thing's blowing up there, and it's just like he still has his limbs are all fine. He's not even really bleeding that much. You would think, right? It's just, I don't think it had its time in its place in FMW. If you're into it. If you see it on the indies somewhere and you're into it, that's cool. But for now, I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something that's plausible that you could actually, especially with it's a new company, but it's still a big company. I mean, they're on TNT, they have pay-per-views. It's a big company. So I just don't see the point of it.
Definitely, man. It's like the greats for it. Mick Foley, like Cactus Jack, obviously when he was doing that, Terry Funk, like those guys that are like known for that kind of stuff, those are mega retired. Like they're not even in what it's doing anymore. And they say like deathmatch wrestling was like, it had its place. It stood out back then when like you had to get people to come and watch the show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like now they're literally on TV. They're going to be doing this on TV. It's like, you don't need to do it. Just put on like a good match. Do a ladder match or something. Just do something fun that people would enjoy. Well,
another thing too is like, now with what we know about concussions and injuries of that state. Remember when Cody took the chair shot from Shawn Spears and he got a lot of flack for taking a head-on chair shot like that? He said never do it again. How far can you really go with this match to make it look as believable as possible without crossing that line that they don't want to cross anymore? So like, somebody gets thrown on barbed wire, but we've seen that. It's just like, it's not really like, I think we're all just desensitized to most of it anyway. So it's like, I don't know how far you can actually take it.
100%, man. I think as well, if it is like the run against the ropes and it blows up, it's kind of stuff, it's just going to look so cheesy.
Yeah.
And so like that like 90s Japan wrestling, which was so like stuck in the 70s and stuff, it just looked terrible. But if it does, I think it would, if they pull it off, it's going to be like a really good match for us to watch in the future. But if they mess it up, it's going to just be like, oh, what the hell have they done? What do you think about Sting in AEW?
Okay, I got a lot of things to say about Sting. I love Sting. I was a big Sting guy. So during that late 90s, WCW was Sting for me and WWE was The Rock. Those are my two guys, right? My brother was a big Austin guy. I was more of the Rock guy. So we would go back and forth between that. Now, Sting himself, I've always been a huge fan. Like I said, I like this TNA stuff. I still felt like he shouldn't have been TNA so long. Should have came to WWE. But him coming in, I understand why they're doing it. I understand as to why they bring the part-timers. They give WWE a lot of flack for this stuff, but for AEW, they give a little bit of a slide because it's still a new kid on the block. He comes in, obviously, to help out Darby Allin. That's just case in point. That's like the main thing. But that storyline's gone up and down because at first it felt like it was going to be Team Taz going against Sting, Darby, and Cody. Now Cody's off doing the thing with Shaq. And the storyline itself has just been a lot of nothing and been drawn out for weeks. They haven't done much, minus the powerbomb spot from this week, which was cool to see. The Darby Allin spot with the body bag and being dragged by the car 2 weeks ago. Other than that, it's just been a lot of one person in the ring, the other person on the Titantron talking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And they haven't done much. I don't know what kind of match you're going to get out of Sting, what he can put out there right now. But I'm fine with Sting being there because I know what he's there to do. But I want it to be this match, and then that's pretty much it. And maybe he goes away for a while and stuff like that. There's not a ton you can do with him now. I don't know how much of a rub Darby's going to get off this thing because there are similar characters. You want to make him feel like he's the next thing or something like that. I get it. I mean, but just I'm not too sure. I think the storyline's just to me, the storyline's like I want it to get over with already. I'm tired of seeing it every week in, week out, and then I just want the match to happen and just move on.
100%, man. I love Sting. Like, even to this day, he's one of my... If you want to say who's your favourite wrestler, I toss up between him and Bret Hart. Mm-hmm. Sting's just... I just love everything he's done. His TNA days, he got me into TNA. But, like, it's really hard to say that I'm just hating this storyline. I'm like, what the... like, I would love him, and I like Darby Allin. I love his kind of character, what he does. You can see the similarities between him and Sting, like, really early Sting. And I was like, just have you as a manager, like just as like an agent or something for Darby Allin, like make him like the gatekeeper to wrestle Darby Allin. So Darby's a weird guy. Then you could be like, try and make the bigger guys like Cage. So Sting would be the person that comes out to talk to them and just be like, oh, you can't wrestle the biggest thing in the business just now and stuff like that. Yeah. I think that would look cooler. But like his main event mafia, that kind of thing, like being like a kind of agent more instead of from being like a wrestler. When I saw him take the powerbomb, I was like, is he okay? Like, is he going to... what's going to happen here?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's like watching your granddad or something just get hit by this young jacked guy. You're like, what do I do? Do you like stand up or something? What do I do?
Yeah.
But like you says, man, that storyline just needs to stop. Really needs to stop. They need to cut the snow out as well. That really gets to me with the snow. I'm like, why are they doing this?
Yeah, I'm tired of the snow. I think like the snow is like every single time he's gonna come out, the snow has to come on. It's like every single time the snow's happening. So I think it's too much. Yeah.
It's like I'm a business owner, so I'm like, how much does this cost? Like, why are they so much snow? What are they doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, man. AEW's got a lot of stuff that they need to work on, right? But I would still say they're the best one to watch on a weekly basis. Them and NXT are probably my two favourites. Impact's one that I'm loving, but the storylines are terrible. Like, I just hate it. So what are you feeling about with the Impact, AEW, New Japan, AAA, everybody kind of teaming up? What are you feeling about that?
I think it's the future of how wrestling's going to work. I think it's just going to be like that. I think everybody's going to team up because except WWE. I think WWE is only going to team up with things that don't have full-fledged television deals, right? Because they see everybody as their competition, even though they don't like to acknowledge it. But I don't think they'll ever team up with anybody that has an actual television deal with an actual television network. I just don't think they do stuff with Evolve, with Progress on the network, all that stuff like that. I think they'll stay in that realm. And I think these other guys are going to be like the territories where they're just, they have they could even do a traveling champ. I've always been a fan of the NWA champion traveling from place to place. One of the big things I felt like with and I covered this in one of my videos about like the brand split, was that it was better to have just one WWE champion, have him travel from show to show. So for example, if the champion is Drew McIntyre, if he has a feud with Roman on SmackDown for the title, then Raw, the main event, is circulating, is focused spotlighting the United States Championship or the IC title, and that becomes the most important thing on the show. And you have SmackDown holding the WWE championship feud. I think they should have just done that. But I'm excited for New Japan to actually show up in AEW, and I think that this is the smartest thing for them to do, is to work all together and in unison. It's the only way not to compete with WWE, but really make a dent in WWE's armor and really push it forward and push the envelope. And you get a lot of matches you wish you've seen, you wish you would have seen, stuff like that. I think it's cool. I think it's great for the fans, and it's basically the only really option they have in like basically the monopoly that is the wrestling business by WWE. And the more of it, I'm down for it. The forbidden door that they keep saying has been broken open. It's great stuff. I think it's just the future of the way wrestling should be going. It's the smartest thing for the smaller companies to do. And I don't think WWE will ever do it, even though Cody recently said that he could see it happening in the future. There's no reason why it shouldn't. I don't think it ever will.
No, man, I don't think WWE's like Disney. If they can't buy you, they're not going to work with you.
Exactly, yeah.
But the smaller guys do need to work together. Like the territory days with like traveling rosters, we'd have guys work a show completely for a couple of months, 2-3 months, and they'd be off to like another territory they'll then exhaust that, then come back. It just keeps it different and lets you see new wrestlers all the time on a kind of traveling basis as well. And it opens up that kind of the smaller guys that maybe might not get a chance to, you can go check them out, get them on social media, with how easily accessible every wrestler is just now. It's really great just to be able to kind of find new people that you've not seen before. I think that's something that AEW Dark does really well. There's lots of like independent wrestlers that go in there. I don't really like AEW Dark, but I like watching guys that I've never seen before on it. So like you get a lot of guys that maybe just appear once or twice, and you're like, I like him, I might go check him out. Or you find out like he's just came into wrestling, that was his second match. You're like, oh, he was really good for a second kind of thing. But yeah, WWE's not going to. Maybe they'll do it with NXT, like maybe. But look, for here in Scotland, like the UK, they set up NXT UK and just hired all the good UK wrestlers from every independent.
Exactly, yeah.
And just kind of took them in. Yeah. And there was a long stretch when like independent shows in like Scotland, England, stuff like that was just like terrible. There was nobody to wrestle. There was like barely anybody there.
Well, it's true. Like you said, they're like Disney. If they can't buy you, they're not going to work with you. That's why they signed up like, Eli Drake and guys like that. They sign up they go through their little stints where they pick up as many guys as they can off the independents or free agents, just so nobody else has them. They're not going to want to work with anybody else because they can just buy everybody else if they wanted to.
So it's insane. Like they're in that position. They deserve to be in that position. They're the biggest wrestling company in the world. And they've earned to get to that. But like, just going around and buying people randomly. When you see they've just picked up something, you're like, what are you going to do with them? And then it's like 4 years later, and they're coming on AEW, like
exactly,
NXT, or they're getting released, and you're like, what were they doing? Just sitting around like at the Performance Center doing nothing?
But it'd be cool to see like the traveling champion, like, like let's say Kenny Omega, you see him at a big New Japan show, like even if he's the main event of that show facing another New Japan wrestler for the AEW championship. You could even see the IWGP titles defended at a big Double or Nothing show or a big, whatever show they have for AEW, whatever pay-per-view coming up after Revolution. They could do stuff like that. There's a lot of cool things. I think it'll even help Impact. I think Impact will benefit the most, because they're the one everybody sees is kind of like, that's TNA. They've been around for such a long time. They're a joke. They're not really all that great. They've gone through so many ups and downs over the past decade. So it's like, I think they'll benefit the most, even though I feel right now that the crossover hasn't reached where it probably should be. It's like, they're teasing you here and there. They'll have like a couple guys show up over there, a couple guys show up over here, but it hasn't been a full-fledged, like, I don't know if they're going to go with the invasion stuff. I don't know if they're going to do that, to be honest with you. But I kind of want to see it kind of ramp up a little bit.
But I hope they do like the invasion stuff. I thought it was going to be like us against them. Like,
Yeah.
instead of it, pretty much it just looks like they wanted to work with Impact because they had the Good Brothers and they were like, oh, we just want those guys with Kenny. The rest of you can just do what you want. But I really hope that I love Impact. It's one of my favourite shows to watch because barely anybody watches it. And every single week, the storylines, if you just forget storylines and watch the in-ring work, it's really good. When they start doing like storylines or like court cases and stuff, you're like, this is terrible.
But ridiculous, yeah.
You're like, what? Why are you doing this? Just forget that bit and wrestle like you used to do back in the TNA days.
But I do honestly think that Impact itself can really help AEW's women's division because they have Deonna Purrazzo, right? I think what they should do is after Revolution, they have the Hikaru Shida match. Whoever wins the tournament is going to face Hikaru Shida for the title. I think Deonna Purrazzo should show up and beat down whoever wins that match. I think it'll give it a real jolt. Because personally, I don't think AEW knows how to handle their women's division properly. I don't think they highlight it enough. And I think when they do, they don't capitalize on it. That's why WWE is so much better than them at women's wrestling at this point, like just the way they present it and the way it comes off, especially on NXT. I think Deonna Purrazzo showing up from Impact and AEW will really give like a jolt to the women's division. And I think that's probably the spot where they can benefit the most mutually between the two is the women from Impact, the knockouts from Impact coming to AEW and getting involved in the AEW storylines. I think it'll give by default, it'll make the storylines for the women more important on the show.
100%, man. The AEW women's division, like if you were to ask me to name 10 of them, I would struggle.
Oh, no, I don't think
maybe 2, 3. Like, like every week like this week, I couldn't name the women's match. I know there was one on it. I'm sure there was one on this week.
Yeah.
And I just could not. I reviewed it, watched it, and I can't name it.
Well, one of the most interesting things is that one of the women that wrestled isn't even an AEW superstar. She's the NWA Women's Champion.
Yeah, that was it.
that's what it is. It's crazy, right? It's crazy. It's crazy how like the fact that like the match you had, one of them is not actually an AEW wrestler. It's an NWA wrestler. So, I mean, I just feel like they have no idea how to present. I think they're just focusing too much. Not too much, but they're just prioritizing the tag team too much. And I guess most of the singles men stuff rather than giving a spot for the women to really showcase. Because I think to me, one of the biggest stars they have overall in the company is Britt Baker. I think she's one of the most charismatic, entertaining characters they have on the show, both men and women. And I think she should be the champion, should have been the champion by now. And I think she should be the one to win the tournament and then eventually beat Hikaru Shida. But the women's division is extremely like weak, especially character-wise, importance on the card. I mean, like I can't remember the last time I saw Chris Statlander, the alien one. I can't remember the last time I seen her on TV. Riho was the one that faced Serena Deeb on Dynamite. You hadn't seen her in like 11 months. Nyla Rose was the dominant champion, lost, and then she's like in and out. I don't know what happened with her and Vicky Guerrero. They just, I don't know. AEW drops a lot of stuff quick too. They drop their storylines like out of nowhere. It's like the storyline's done. You don't see it anymore.
100%, man. And the thing that really gets me with AEW is I get that they were saying it was going to be more sports-based, which obviously it's wrestling. They shouldn't have said that. They should just let it be wrestling what it is.
Yeah.
If you want to do the sports-based kind of style wrestling, that's cool. Just have that as a different show because people like to watch wrestling. You could do like a fucking MMA work if you want. Like, that's fine. Yeah. But like, just have it as a different show or have it as a part of the show. But the thing that really gets me is how the women's stuff gets put down, and then you're getting like it's going to be like this sports-based kind of stuff. Why they always got battle royals? That's what I don't get. Like tag team battle royals. Then you're saying like you were saying about the women. Sometimes you don't see them for 11 months. I get that if it's more sports-based, but it's like there's literally no women. Like when I see them come out, I'm like, I didn't even know they were with AEW. And then like the NWA, you're like, oh, I have totally forgot the NWA was still there. And then you're just like, what? Why are you doing? Like, you've got so many you've got Tay Conti, who's going to be like a huge star in maybe like 5-6 years, who's great in the ring. Britt Baker, you've got insane amounts of women talent there, and it's just nothing. But I think WWE is the best at that at the minute. They know how to make wrestlers and how to break wrestlers. So they know what to do with women. They're like, cool, we just need to get every single one of these people over and just make them look good. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
The other thing I've been thinking about recently, so I wanted to, it's the first time I've said this in a podcast, is WrestleMania is bigger than WWE now. So they don't even, it's just WrestleMania. They try and not brand it. It's just WrestleMania. what about if traveling champions, stuff like that? Like, you just had WrestleMania, every wrestling company sits down, big wrestling companies, and they hit like a certain amount of money or something. You sit down, then they book it like a fantasy booking. So like every year you could have Roman against Kenny Omega for the professional wrestling world champion. So the big belt that you get, and then it's that company's got the star for the year. Like, I think that's what they were trying to do back in like when Vince McMahon was gone around stealing all the territories and buying them out. That's what they were trying to do, something like that. And I think to this day and age, to make a champion feel like just like it, untouchable, that's kind of what you need to do, is just have that WrestleMania as like an unattainable, like it's above every wrestling company, and everybody just comes together to make it this great show every year.
Well, that's similar to like how they do in professional fighting, right? So they have, you have boxing that has a million different heavyweight championships, WBO, WBA, all this stuff like that, IBO, and then eventually you want to unify them, right? So that's kind of in that same vein where you would kind of like, it's so many wrestling companies, so many different champions, you would have them face each other at a spot like that to have the real like unifying match to see who's like the number one guy. I get what you're saying on that point, yeah.
I think it would be cool, but you just know Vince would be like,
no, he wouldn't.
No.
He would never be down with that. No, especially not with that's like his baby right there. WrestleMania is like that's his cash cow, his moneymaker. Every year he knows how much money's gonna come in. Every year it keeps going up. How much money he brings in minus last year. But yeah, it's just like that everybody's living in his world. And until he steps down or passes away, and whoever takes it over after that, I mean, it's just like that's really when you'll start seeing changes. Is whoever takes over WWE after Vince retires or passes away, whichever one comes first. So it's like at that point you'll end up seeing a lot more outside the box stuff, whether it's Triple H and Stephanie that take it over, or Shane McMahon, the three of them, a trio, or I was hearing rumors that Peacock, NBC Universal may end up trying to put an offer into the company eventually, because now they bought the rights in the US to the network for $1 billion. So I mean, you never know. They could kind of jump in and be like, okay, we'll buy the company, we'll buy a majority of the shares, and we'll be the stockholder. They could do something like that. But I think that's the only time you'll end up being able to kind of fantasize a little bit more about what they could eventually be doing, because Vince is just stuck in his world, for better or for worse. He's stuck in his own universe, his own bubble. It's what he says, and he has every right to do so because he's the most liable of anybody in that company because he owns the majority of it. So It's tough, but I think after Vince retires or passes, when you start seeing a little bit more of this, more out of the box type stuff, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. I just would love to have like that WrestleMania moment, as like you would see just anybody come to WrestleMania. So like instead of from it just being WWE guys, you get every wrestling company involved in it, and the amount of money that fans would pay to watch that. So you get people that hate WWE that would want to see like an AEW star face Roman Reigns to like beat the shit out of him or something. But I think people would pay for it. It would make good money, and I think that's the only reason Vince would be interested in it, is if somebody would go to him and go, look, you can make this amount, and he would be like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, I'll go do it. Yeah, of course.
But I've been hearing the Universal kind of rumours as well. Disney looking at WWE, maybe picking it up there, which would probably kill the wrestling business for a while. But
probably, yeah.
I think it is going to take like probably Universal, Disney, somebody like that's going to get it. Triple H will be like the Dana White, that he's just kind of there as a figurehead, oversees it a little bit, puts his kind of part into book stuff, but that'll be like hit. Like I think wrestling's it's either going to go into a peak again, or it's going to go into a further dip than what it was already in.
Yeah, well, they say like that the business itself is always like cyclical, right? It has its highs and its lows. The mega highs, I don't think might ever be reached again. Those mega highs of the Hogan era, the Austin era, I don't think those will ever be reached again, because I don't think there's enough. I just think there's the way the world is now and how everything's so like instant gratification for everything, short attention span type stuff. I don't think people have the I don't think people want to be that invested in something that for it to get to that level again. Unless that has something to do with superheroes or something like that. That's the way it's going to get up there.
No, definitely. But like, I think there's a lot that WWE can learn from the UFC. So people like Conor McGregor and stuff like that. Like, people get invested in Conor McGregor so much, like then they start to dislike him. So then I'm like, that's been what, 5 years, 6 years? He's been kind of stonting around in the UFC. So like, you can definitely have like still people will get invested in a long thing if they can buy into it. There's nothing really you can watch in wrestling and be like, oh, I can watch this for the next year, because even the Roman Reigns stuff, you're like, that's the coolest thing happening in WWE just now. The Drew McIntyre stuff as well. Apart from that, you're like, I don't want to sit and watch this for like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, which you know they're going to do with Roman Reigns. He's going to be up there for 5, 6, 10 years.
Yeah. But you see, like, the way the build of Roman Reigns, I think it's the most interesting thing, right? I think it wouldn't have been as, because I love Roman Reigns and his character that he has right now. I always bring it up. He's like a mafia boss is what he feels like, a crime boss is what he feels like at this moment in the situation that he's in right now. But I think it wouldn't have been as big or as good if they would have turned him heel earlier. I think they did it at the right, perfect time.
Yeah, man, it's that John Cena effect, isn't it? Like, everybody was just hating him, and he was still like a good guy. So I think Roman Reigns is the best thing that WWE's done in a long time. But turning him heel when they did was the best part of it. Like, putting him with Heyman as well, which is, Heyman can make anything good, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even if it's bad, he makes it good. And what's your opinions on, like, people saying Cesaro should be like the world champion? Do you think he should be a champion, or do you? My opinion is, I don't think he's going to get the belt because he just doesn't look like a champion. He looks like a Scott Hall back in the day. You could never imagine Scott Hall being the world champion, but he was good for the position in the card that he was. Like, he could push people up there. He could put on good matches, like an Owen Hart, stuff like that. Like, they know their place, which I think Cesaro does as well. But I don't think he's at world champion level. No, for WWE and stuff like that.
Well, the way I see Cesaro, so like I'm planning on making a video about Cesaro. So I have this like series of videos where I'm talking about current and former talent WWE is just completely wasted. Episode 1 was Elias. I think he's just completely wasted Elias. Episode 2 is Cody Rhodes. So I think it's like one of the biggest missed opportunities by WWE in a long time. Cesaro is one that I'm going to make the next episode on, but Cesaro is the guy who I think is just too far gone at this point. Like, at this point, to make him champion I think that the time has passed. I think that should have happened when he won that Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, when he tossed, Big Show over the top rope like a sack of potatoes, like super easy, just tossed his ass out. And I think that was the time for you to strike on Cesaro and push him to the top. I think he could have been a champion at that point. He's not that good on the mic, and he's been saddled with the fact that he's really good in tag teams. I think that's hurt him. Even though it's one of his best attributes, I think it hurt him in the end because he gets a little bit of a singles run, gets a little bit of a push. Remember, he was a Heyman guy at one point. A little bit of a push, then gets saddled again with the tag team shtick. So I think that's one of the things that hurt him the most. But at this point, I think it's just too late to give him the championship now. It's just kind of like fan service at this point. I don't think it's good for Cesaro. I don't think it's good for the company. I don't think it's a good direction creatively. And I think this is going to be another one of those pushes they give him, and then he'll go back into a tag team after that. So that's the way I see it, to be honest with you. And like in the video I'm going to make, that's what I'm going to talk about. There's so many ways they could have made him better and could have really pushed him, but to be honest with you, it's just too late. To me, it's just too late.
Yeah, 100%, man. I just don't think he's got it in him to be the champion anymore. Like you says, back at the Andre Giant Memorial Battle Royal, that was the time when I thought, cool, this will be him getting that point. But if you give him it now, it's literally they're just looking on Twitter and looking to see what people are going to want. What's your feelings on Bobby Lashley? So I remember Bobby Lashley flew back in the WWE ECW when he had that Vince McMahon terrible feud. He got the ECW belt, and I remember there's a poster had Cena, Taker, and Bobby Lashley on it. So it was like we're really pushing him as the next big guy. I felt back then he had the potential to be the champion, but then now I love the character. I hated the Hurt Business at the start, but I really loved him for the past 4 or 5 months. But I don't think he's going to be, I see on Twitter and stuff like that, a lot of people he should be the champion, he should get the belt. I think he'll get the main event spot, but I don't think he'll take the belt from anybody. I think he'll just be a good run, then he'll do a Kevin Owens kind of run.
Yeah, or like a Braun Strowman type thing where remember Braun Strowman went on a run where he was for the title a lot and he just never won. Mm-hmm. And I think that hurt Braun Strowman. But when it comes to Bobby Lashley, I think he's always going to be destined or always should be the champion at one point because he has just one of the most amazing looks that you'll ever see. And he looks like a champion. He does. If you look at him just appearance-wise, he looks like somebody that you would put him out there and everybody believe okay, that guy's a champion. I believe that. Guys like Roman, guys like Drew, those guys, you see them out there and they look like megastars. They look like champions. Bobby Lashley has that look. Where he may not have it is on the mic, And I think he's always needed a mouthpiece, something they should have given him. And I think what would have got him even more to that point was if they ever would have done the match against Brock Lesnar, which they never did. They never did the match between him and Brock. They've had chances and they just never done it. But I think Lashley's one of those guys who always be in somebody's mind as to become a champion or should be a champion just on his looks alone.
Yeah, man, I think that's the problem. Like, just now, there's so many people in the roster that's like, oh, you could be a champion or you should have been a champion, but there's no like championship material. Like, even for me, AJ, he was always a TNA guy. The indie kind of look, the way he moves, he always looked better elsewhere than what he did in WWE. Now, I love the work he's done in WWE, but he just doesn't look the same as what he did, like, obviously because he's older, but I mean, like, what he did in like TNA and stuff like that. You're watching him, just the way he moves. When you watch him in WWE, you're just like, there's something like, it just doesn't feel right in that, like, the way it looks, it just doesn't feel right. I know he's obviously got the champion, but he has been the champion, but I'm like, it's just what, like, something's missing, and I feel there's a lot of missing puzzle pieces from a lot of wrestlers in WWE, and I don't know if that's like the creative side of it, the writing side. There's just, it feels like something doesn't click with a lot of people, like even Sasha Banks or Bayley. Like, Sasha Banks and Bayley have great matches, but I'm like, I don't really care. Does that make sense? Like, because
no, it does make a lot of sense. I get what you're saying, and I think it's more of a creative thing, a writing thing, because like when you say AJ Styles, right? AJ Styles is one of my like favorites of all time, right? To me, a lot of people say it, but he is Shawn Michaels. Like in the ring, when it comes to just in ring, he's the closest thing to Shawn Michaels, just in terms of how everything he does looks, how crisp everything is, everything he does, little tiny nuances that he adds into everything like that. I think he's just the closest thing to Shawn Michaels. Hence why Undertaker wanted to have his last match with him. Now, it is creatively. It just is. It is. I think AJ Styles was best as a nasty heel with the two guys behind them, like with Gallows and Anderson. They should have kept pushing that, and I think getting away from that hurt AJ a little bit. He's at his best when he's that either a really like fighting champion babyface or one of those nasty heels with like a crew behind him, Bullet Club style. And for people like Sasha, Bayley, it's all creative to me. I think it's just bad creative, bad spots, and not making the storylines interesting enough or compelling enough to really get you like invested in the character. You think about them like, oh, they're cool, I like them, so and so, this person's cool, this person's really good. Because a lot of things, everybody's like, this guy should be champion, this person should be champion because he's so good in the ring. Like, look at Ricochet. Ricochet is one of those guys that I think if he would have found his voice on the mic and creatively, he'd be one of the best, like, underdog good guys. He could have hella great matches with the likes of, like, Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman, guys that are just so overmatched by him. Like, he's so overmatched by them, they can really fight from underneath. But I think it's just a lot of these guys that you say, people say, oh, he's so good in the ring, he should be champion. I was like, it's got all about character. It's all about, you look at The Rock. Take The Rock, for example. You look at his matches. He doesn't do a ton. It's a lot of punching, a lot of Irish whips to the ropes. You see that all the time in his matches. And Austin, too, after the neck injury, is all that. It's like punching, kicking, Irish whips, maybe a DDT here and there. It's not a lot. But the fans are just rabid for it. They're like all in.
But the biggest one that's a terrible wrestler is Hogan. He's the most over wrestler ever in history. People can just look at him and be like, that's Hulk Hogan. Like, people don't even watch it and know who he is. But like, I think totally agree, man. Like, you can be the best in-ring worker in the world, but if you're just kind of like just on the mic and you speak terrible, it's like, well, what am I going to buy into? And I think that's the problem with WWE and AEW to some extent as well. Like, when you hear Kenny Omega on the mic, I love Kenny Omega's matches. I love everything he does. The Japanese work was amazing. I just don't buy him as like now somebody you could be like, that's the preferred, like a Hulk Hogan or a Randy Savage, a Rock, an Austin, Brock Lesnar, like somebody you could be like, that's the world champion of professional wrestling. I don't buy it with like Omega, maybe Reigns, maybe Drew. But I'm a wee bit biased because he literally stays like an hour from me when he's in Scotland, so it's not that bad. But it's like, there's nobody you can be like, that's the champion. Like John Moxley as well. Like, when he had the belt, it's totally forgettable what he was doing. Like, he cuts a hell of a promo, but the minute he goes in the ring, it's just like, you're the WWE guy. Like, why? Like, they've hired you just because you're the WWE guy. Just play up to that. I thought he was going to come in and try to do like the NWO kind of thing. Like, oh, I'm from the big guys, I'm coming down to the wee people to help you. But then they don't do that at all. And I'm like, just play up to it. Like, say that you're from the bigger company and we're here to try and help you or something. Just make it people hate you. That's what you should do.
Yeah. But like with Moxley, I mean, yeah, he does kind of a hell of a promo, right? He does completely. With Moxley, his title run, I think obviously the no fans hurts it. I think that hurts it like a lot. Like Drew's title run's been hurt by that as well. The no fans thing. Moxley, when I saw his title run, it was similar. They were trying to make it a Bret Hart run where he takes on all the biggest guys in the companies. What he was doing, he was taking on all the biggest guys and taking on all comers. That's what I felt like it. But it just, I don't know, it just didn't come off well. Plus, the way AEW is working is like you won't see guys for a while. It's weird. Like, remember Sean Spears? Like, whatever happened to him? Scorpio Sky. I thought Scorpio Sky was gonna be a big star in AEW, and like as they were pushing him, he still can be, but you just never see them. They're gone for months on end, and it's just everybody kind of just drops because you don't see them for months on end in AEW.
When you just said Scorpio Sky and it came back to my head, I was like, I forgot he was even in AEW. I've just replaced him in my head with Ray Phoenix. Like, for some reason, it's like he's just been replaced by that Ray Phoenix because he's getting his kind of push that he was getting. But, yeah, man, AEW, like you were saying earlier, they just drop storylines, like, randomly. Like, you could be midway through it, you're starting to buy into it, and it just never happens. You're like,
totally. It just stops, It just completely stops,
Like, the breakup of that kind of inner circle thing, there was, like, everybody was ready to start breaking up, and then it's like, oh, Sammy Guevara left, and then, like, oh, we'll continue this. We're still together, but we're maybe not together.
Yeah.
And then only us will be a tag team, but then other people will be tag teams. You're like, what's happening? I thought we were just breaking it.
That was funny. It was like, all right, so they had a match to see who's going to be the official tag team in the Inner Circle. And then 2 weeks later, Santana and Ortiz are getting a title shot. Like, it makes no sense.
It's like if you forgot that, you just lost the paper, the post-it notes,
like,
whatever.
People always say stuff about Vince, like changing the show up like 2 hours before, an hour before. But it happens on AEW all the time. You just see stuff get just like dropped just like that. You don't see it from like, for 6 months, you don't see a guy who was in a storyline. Like Archer was another guy who's like, he was there, got the run against Cody. I thought that was terribly done. And then he disappears. And then he eventually comes back and then disappears again. And then he comes back. It's just like, it's crazy.
The stuff with like Jake the Snake and stuff like that coming in, I'm like, oh, this will be a cool rub. And then he comes back out. Like just now he's a face. I'm like, why are you a good guy? Like,
it makes no sense. Yeah,
a big scary bad. Like, if I was outside at a bar and this guy was like there, I'd be like, that's a big scary guy. Like, he's
not a nice guy. Yeah, he's not a nice guy.
He genuinely probably is a nice guy in real life, but like in the ring, you see him, you're like, that's a scary guy. Like the way he looks. But I don't get why they're doing like the good guy thing. But he's not a good guy, and I'm like, this. Well, okay, AEW. It feels like the term I've been using is like WhatsApp booking, like some like WhatsApp group booking. Sometimes they're just a big group and they're just like typing stuff, and it's like, okay, we'll do
gotcha, yeah.
But I'm like, they need to like try and get some sort of like steady progression. They have it with some things, but like you were saying, they drop stuff, the Archer stuff, there's countless amounts of things. Like, obviously, the one they've done terrible is Sting, Cage, that kind of terrible storyline that's going on just now. And even the Kenny Omega and John Moxley stuff, it's people like, oh, it's been going on for years. I'm like, I don't really care what's been going on. Like, I don't buy Kenny Omega, John Moxley. Like, when I watch it, it's a good match, but like, I'm like, Omega looks better in it, or Moxley's probably the person to give the belt to because you can get that WWE crowd.
Yeah.
But I don't really care for it. Like, the death match coming up, the match they done before, I gave it a 5-star rating, 4.5 star, I think it was, on my review. But like, I didn't care for it. I says it in the review. I was like, I really don't care for this match at all. But it was a really good match. Like, it was like good, but I don't care for it.
It's actually interesting because, like, for me with Kenny and Moxley, I don't care about the match either. But mainly because I only care about what's gonna happen with Impact and New Japan being part of it, right? I care about that. Like, I care more about who's gonna show up, and I think that might be hurting the feud. In hindsight, if you look at it, that people are just like, I wonder who's going to show up, right? Like, I wonder, Kenny seems to be the lightning rod as to who shows up and who doesn't. So it just seems to be like you're watching the match. Like, I actually guarantee the Revolution match, you were just waiting to see if Okada or if Ibushi or something like that, like somebody's going to show up. Like, that's all you're waiting for me anyways. Like, I feel like I don't care about this match, whoever wins, but I want to see who's going to come out afterwards or interfere or whatever the case is.
Definitely, man. That's like the reason that people are watching it at the minute as well. Like, I think if they were going to do it cooler, they should have just made like Omega and John Moxley like Brawl and Impact Wrestling. They go to New Japan and they have a match over there as well. Just make it like this is like a global feud. Obviously with COVID, it's a little bit harder to do that, but like they could have tried to do something. So one of the coming up to like kind of last couple of questions. Who's your favourite wrestler of all time? The guy you're like, I can watch all the women that you can watch all the time. Who's your favourite?
I'm always gonna have to go with The Rock. It's just like that's the guy. Like that's what I had growing up. Now in hindsight, his matches really aren't all that great. So like I don't really go back and watch. Him was just the character, who he was. I always like, for me at this point right now, a wrestler in ring of all time would have to be Bret Hart. Just in terms of going back and watching his matches. But I always said the guy like right now is for me is AJ Styles.
Yeah, man. I'd probably be the same. Well, not The Rock, because I wasn't a big Rock fan growing up. I was more of a Austin fan, if you can't tell with the other thing. But so I was Sting, Austin, but Bret Hart is my all-time.
Yeah. Sting
and Bret Hart kind of tie, but just to go get somebody to watch that's haven't watched wrestling before, you need to put that Bret Hart on with like the pink and just he stands out. He looks like a champion and he puts on a hell of a match. So I always put that on. And the last question is, if you could go in the ring, wrestle anybody at any time, who would it be and what event would it be at? Would it be a Raw? Would it be a WrestleMania? Like, who would it be and what event would it be?
It's either going to have to be Hogan or Austin at Mania, because that's where you're going to make the most money. If I was looking at it, it'd just be that. That's like where you're going to make the most money is against one of those two guys at WrestleMania. That's it, like right there. That's pretty much it, yeah, if I had to choose.
Yeah, man, when I was a kid, like when I was like 18, 17, and that, like you're not really stressing about anything, I would probably have picked like, I'd go wrestle on ECW against Sandman or Sabu or something like that. But then now, like as an adult with like things to pay, my brain's always like, so how much money would I make? And it would probably be like, for me, money wise, I would probably pick John Cena at WrestleMania, just because you could have an easy match with Cena, and also you'd make a ton of cash just letting them throw you around for a while, get bet, and you still go home with a good pay packet. So that would be like my kind of one. But I get what you're saying about the Hogan stuff. I think that would be cool to go back and wrestle against Hogan.
I mean, because you got to put it in the time frame too. So like Hogan at his time, how much he made seems like not as much now compared to what Cena was making. But in relation to the time periods, it's about the same, I would say, right? Like Hogan, Austin, and Cena, those are the big three like money makers over the years. So if you put their eras together and kind of compare like the money wise, like in terms of inflation and difference in prices and stuff like that, it may end up being the same. But yeah, I guess Cena's another guy you probably put, like if I was to wrestle, I'd probably wrestle one of those three guys at a Mania, because that's where you're gonna make the most money. If in any era, yeah,
definitely, man. And just finishing off before we do, what's your opinions on Hogan? Do you think he should stop appearing on Raw every now and again, just looking terrible, or do you think they should still try and use him in those kind of roles?
I think the thing with Hogan is no matter what he does, he's still gonna get a massive reaction when he shows up. People still go crazy because until the people, it won't ever happen. But because he'll die before they do. The people who grew up watching him die, and just like a new generation comes in, it won't happen because he'll pass away before that. But it's like all of us, we saw him as kids. So no matter what he does that may bother you, get you angry, or whatever the case may be, he still gets a massive reaction. People are excited to see Hogan. When that music hits, people still go crazy. So some of it might be kind of cringe. Like the last thing he did on Legends Night was kind of cringe. I don't have a problem with it because it's Hogan. Like to me, it's like I don't have a problem with seeing Austin every once in a while, or guys like that. Like it doesn't bother me as long as they're not in matches. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like if Hogan came back and had a match, then I'd like that's not that great.
Hogan's tried to have a match, and you'll probably be messaging, I could make this guy go over or something. Like, I could still go out. Like I think he would still wrestle till the day that he would have to be like wheeled out in a wheelchair. Like that guy's just wrestling. That's what he is. But anyway, man, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. Where can people find you? I've got the links in the description below, but let people know in case they don't go to the description.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun, man. You can find me Rated R for Rasslin is the channel. I do, the reviews of all the shows for AW, WWE, the pay-per-views, stuff like that. I do a lot of topical videos, some ranking videos, some news and rumors stuff. I got a lot of stuff in the works, so check me out there on the YouTube, Rated R for Rasslin. At Rated R_25 on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok as well. That's pretty much all the spots you can find me at. Check out the channel. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I like working with other people, collaborating, doing stuff like this. It's a lot of fun being on here.
Yeah, man. So I'm going to hit stop. But if you just wait there, and I'll talk to you after the kind of podcast.
Gotcha.